When you think about the conservation of art, in your mind's eye, you see storage rooms full of paintings, temperature and humidity carefully controlled, armies of experts ready at the drop of a hat to repair any damage with their expertise and their resources. Nowadays, however, more and more artists are taking leave of the painter's brushes. They are moving on to new media such as video, or they're making installations of transient materials such as polystyrene, wax, and scotch tape. Can these works be saved for art lovers of the future? In 2005, the Rotterdam Museum Boijmans van Beuningen showed the installation Notion Motion by the Icelandic-Danish artist Olafur Eliasson. Eliasson is one of the best-known artists of his generation. He makes installations with ephemeral materials such as mist and water. Now the museum is reconstructing the work together with Eliasson's studio. But the question remains, how do you preserve a work made of water, light, and movement?
Found it here. Yeah, this is actually, not even this. This and this is what we bought. So this is the work of Olafur Eliasson, and here, this is probably the most interesting part. So these is, of course, these are our spaces, and then this gives some measurements. But that's all that you buy. And here, of course, it's saying that this is a certificate of authenticity, and then it's more like they say, the piece must be installed as described in the installation drawing on this document. So that's the other one. Each new installation must be made in collaboration with Neuger Riemschneider, which is the Berlin gallery of Olafur Eliasson, Olafur Eliasson Werkstatt and Bureau, or the estate of the artist.
You know what I think is wonderful? This is a certificate of authenticity, but it's been faxed and photocopied.
Yeah.
Was the work originally documented when it was installed in 2005?
Not in that sense, because we didn't know that we could be able to purchase the work. So what we did was actually that when we were de-installing the work, we knew that we had bought it already, and then we tried to document it. So this is also a challenge for us to see if it works the way we try to document it afterwards. People always ask, how can you ever buy such amazing works? Because this is like 1,500 square meters of work. So,
and it's made of water and light.
Water,
and
light, wood. So these kind of very poor materials. So of course it's a waste of money to keep these materials. So we more or less destroy everything, but we're keeping some samples that we thought can be useful to reconstruct the work. So what you do if you buy a work, this kind of work, which are huge installations, so you buy the concept of the work.
The conservation of the concept of an artwork is a new challenge for conservators. But the conservation of contemporary art also has other issues. How to deal with artworks that are dependent on technical equipment? In the 60s, the medium of video arose. Due to the speed with which technology has been developing since, innumerable new possibilities have been created for artists. Meanwhile, however, outdated technologies make it very hard for museums to continue to show these works to the public. Exhange Fields is an interactive video installation by the American artist Bill Seaman. The installation was made and exhibited 10 years ago, and it is now shown for the second time in the Dortmunder U. Despite the fact that the installation is only 10 years old, the equipment was antiquated or had broken down. It has all been replaced, and after thorough study, the work has been digitalized.
It's a very special kind of piece. There are 13 furniture sculptures in the work, and each of these sculptures kind of suggests how you might position your body with it. So it's a kind of interface strategy, a new kind of interface, this physical interface. And for each of the sculptures, there's a series of dances, a suite of different ones that all relate to the particular part of the body that's in it. And so the whole kind of idea is a loop, a kind of cybernetic loop between the person who's interacting with the sculpture, and then the image that comes up on the screen. And so you have this very strong connection to the image. Up to 4 people working together at one time.
There's an element to it, Bill, of a test. Do you read me? Are you out there? Do you hear me?
I mean, does it understand that
Does
you've
it understand me? Yeah.
And do you think it's answering you, or?
Yes, but it is indeed very quick, and the fact that the 2 images become overlaid makes you understand that yes, it is hearing you. What was the technology that you used for the original installation?
Yeah, the original installation was done with Laserdisc, and Laserdisc could hold half an hour of video and instantly be searched and played back very quickly. So in that year, in the year 2000, that was really state of the art.
The work is 10 years old, but it has been produced with a video technology which is obsolete today. Bill Seaman used the so-called Laserdisc at the time, and today it's hard to find any player for this technology. And this, in fact, forms some scenario that we have with many video-based artworks, that either the video format or the display equipment is no longer available. And you may have experienced that yourself with some audio tapes or videotapes you have at home.
There was a very large team involved in studying the work before the conservation actually started. Why was such thorough study required?
In fact, the museum had no documentation on this artwork when they acquired it. They didn't know exactly what was the original format of the video, how the elements interacted. They had no code from the computer program. Many artists haven't even thought about this issue because they are so much in the present and into future ideas, and they don't care that much what will happen with the artwork at the time when they can't look after these works. And often even institutions like museums didn't consider that beforehand, and they only realize at a certain time when the artists can't be called in any longer that they are facing a problem.
One of the elements of the restoration effort was an extensive interview with the artist about his intentions. Why is the artist interview so important?
The artist can tell us a lot about the artistic intention he followed to create this work, how it was made, how it functions, what is the essence of the work.
The issues of preservation, documentation, and presentation gave birth to the symposium Contemporary Art, Who Cares? At the Royal Institute of the Tropics in Amsterdam, a huge crowd of 600 international experts has gathered to exchange knowledge, ideas, and experiences on a topic that is becoming increasingly important, the conservation of contemporary art. While they are working together to get a grip on these issues, the artist Tino Sehgal turns the world upside down again. He calls his artworks situations. For example, museum guards or visitors turn out to be interpreters of a performance when you're passing by. Sehgal's works can be seen in museums all over the world, but they leave hardly a trace. The only way to see his works is to experience them yourself. Sehgal prohibits any kind of written documentation, photographs, or video registration of his work. We want to talk about his work, but even getting in touch with him was a challenge.
You can both speak now.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Sehgal. This is Tracy Metz. You do not allow any form of documentation of your work by museums, and you insisted that YouTube remove all the films that have been made of your work by museum visitors. Why is it that you are so adamant about not having your work registered or documented?
Oh, because I think I just don't need it. Now the works can be repeated, and also the core of the work is, this kind of the experience of the visitor. That would be something which would be lost in a video or especially in a photo. I'm much more interested into giving a precise and high quality of an experience rather than just somehow distributing it. I mean, we have enough phenomena which get distributed en masse over the globe.
What happens when you sell a work? I assume you sign a contract? Who is involved?
The sales contract is just an oral contract. Instead of a written contract, we do an oral contract, which is legally just as fine. That's why we can also get away with doing it, because it's legally actually sound. We discuss the conditions, and then at the end, the buyer and Jan shake hands.
Explain to me, Jan, how do you show his works without any images or documentation?
It's basically quite simple. He comes to the gallery, and for days, sometimes for weeks, you rehearse with him. So instead of showing a picture to a collector or to a museum person, I've found quite a pleasure in doing the movements in front of people, even if I'm rather a shy person, I think. But doing his work in the gallery, I've really passed behind certain limits, in terms of exposing yourself. I remember very well the first show we did with Tino, where we showed all kinds of small excerpts of all the works he had done until that moment. One of the works is the work called Kiss. So it's the work where at one moment, or within the piece in the gallery at one moment, and I need to say, and the next piece is guards kissing. And then my assistant came and we started kissing each other in front of the collectors or any kind of visitor. And then after that we would do the piece Kiss, so I would go on my knee and I would take my assistant on my knee, I would let her fall on the floor gently, and then we would do all these movements which are part of the word Kiss. So to do that, in order to do that, you have to kind of get over a certain kind of shyness, as you can imagine. It's also the only way, actually, to make it visible, is kind of explain it. Show it, I mean, do it.
The most interesting part of the work is how to preserve the concept. So what is the freedom of the curator or who else is going to reinstall it regarding the work? So if, for example, if we have a space which is twice as small as this, is it still the same work? And if we're able to install it in a space twice as small as this, what's going to change? I try to figure out with the artist what are the parameters within we have to work if we reconstruct the work like this.
Yeah, this is an essential part of the installation, but what is it?
Yes, this is one of the most technical parts of the installation, because if you can see here, this is really mechanics, but always very simple mechanics, which makes that every 3 minutes there's going to be like a sponge over there, and here this is going to be a huge basin of water again. And every 3 minutes, all of a sudden the sponge plunges into the water. And this particular part is interesting because when it was first initially installed, this was broke every 2 days or whatever. So of course it's also like a way of adjusting, improving things. On the other hand, it's important for Edison that the mechanics are visible, that it's not like a trick. So of course, so therefore, if we make here something which you cannot see, or which is completely like computer controlled or whatever, it will definitely be different. So I think these are the parameters that we're trying to find out and to figure out how far can we go, how far does he want to go, and of course also, I can imagine that within 10 years, if we ask him, he's probably into computerized whatever mechanics, and then he will say, okay, it's good to do this. But then probably we as museum can say no, but then we change the work. We don't want to have this computerized mechanic. So there's always this sort of tension and discussion between the collector, in this case the museum, and the artist.
In the beginning, in the original installation, there was a delay between the visitor giving command, shall we say, to the sensor, and that you saw the reaction on the actual screen due to the old equipment. And now the delay has disappeared. Do you feel that some of the authenticity and the scratchiness of the work has disappeared?
No, in fact, it's more ideal to have less delay. I mean, when the piece was made, we were trying to optimize it so that the feedback was as quickly as possible. But then, you know, there were a series of pieces in the system. There was not only the laser displayer, there were computer-controlled mixers. And so the system had to be talking to everything and had to look at the different levels and all of these things. And now that's all happening in software. And I wish I could have done it originally like that, but a digital video at that time didn't have the speed or the clarity. Before we had banks of multiple computers and multiple laser displayers. Now it's completely in the digital realm.
I'm sure Bill Seaman was very happy that this work of his, Exhange Fields, has been restored, but I can also imagine that there's a certain tension between the artist and the conservator.
Artists are more involved in the creation of artworks than in the conservation, of course, and so it's natural that, in particular, I would say, media artists tend to move their ideas into according to the available latest technology, and it's the conservators' task to care about the authenticity of the work and not to move it into this new technology too quickly. And so it's a different experience whether you see a black and white film on an old projector with the sound and the light flickering than when you have the same on a flat screen. But some artists would maybe go this way, so then the curator is in this dilemma to decide what approach he might follow.
To what extent is the technology really a part of the artwork, or is it only a vehicle underneath the artwork?
Well, I see it as a vehicle for sure. You kind of want to forget that the technology is even there. You want to be experiencing this dancer. In terms of the furniture sculpture, those could be recreated also. I'm not so worried about the aura of the... There's this famous statement about the aura of the artwork, but I think every artwork carries its sensibility, and I don't worry. I mean, for me, a digital work or a reproduction also carries the presence of the maker somehow.
Even though you can discuss which aspects of an art piece are authentic, conservators always try to stay as close as possible to the original work. But the artist Tino Sehgal doesn't allow any form of documentation, and his artworks have to be transmitted orally from one person to another. Will his work be preserved for future generations? Is the recreation of the work in, say, 50 years, is that an exercise in collective memory?
No, I don't think that it's about collective memory. I think it's just the most safe way to do it. I think that the discourse around my work is like, oh, it's this kind of fragile thing, and will it be forgotten? Will it be like a game of telephone? But I assure you that like the opposite would be the case. If I would give like some written instructions, you know, it would always be kind of, then it would really meander. But if people really know what they're doing, why they're doing it, that's a much more stable sense. It's also like to get away from my work to go into other realms, like where do you learn stuff? You know, like if you think like the English language or Dutch language, you know, you didn't go to the library or to some archive to learn the Dutch language, you learned from your mother, you know? And nobody would be worried that the Dutch language is going to disappear somehow, although it's being transmitted from like mother to child or father to child or something. You know, it's like you never, even if there's like a library or a dictionary in teaching you the language, your mother never used the dictionary or looked up the archive, nor did she tell you to go to the archive. No? So I think most things in life are passed on, from person to person.
I think contemporary art has moved on from thinking that we've got one unique object, in a way that's the challenge of contemporary art, is that was blown apart. But I think there's a real tendency within contemporary art museums to sort of carry on as if those paradigms were still operational. And what Tino does is he totally blows that away. You've got nothing. You haven't even got beautiful instructions. You can't. I mean, the desire for a conservator is always, for these sorts of installation works, to document very meticulously. We would have such amazing documentation about this piece if we were allowed to. It's an itch, And so what it does is it really pushes us back onto thinking about memory.
There's still the idea that a conservator, I would say, spends most of its time in a studio behind an easel, behind a painting, with a very pointed brush and does some retouching. And this paradigm has changed a lot within the last decade. The conservator for modern and contemporary art is more and more, you could call it a mediator between different professionals in the museum, technicians, curators, registrars, artists involved in trying to safeguard these artworks to the next generation.
Documentation than conservation.
Funny, you'd think that the concept would be the more ephemeral part and the actual physical materials would stay. But in fact, it's the other way around.
It's the other way around,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. Without trying to keep the concept, there is no work. You can keep all those materials here, but if you don't know how to handle, how to use it, it doesn't make any sense.
Contemporary art changes constantly, and what we need is more thorough, in-depth study of the new materials and the new technologies being involved to safeguard these works into the future. But what we also need is a more collaborative approach involving other disciplines, like, for example, anthropology, about documentation or interview techniques. And we need to continue, as we are doing now, to collaborate in an international context.
I think the timeless museum object is a myth. So one of the things that we have had in our mind to do, and I think it's a good time to do it now, is to gather our interpreters together for a summer picnic and see if we can have a little moment of conservation.